have reached Peppercom's conferencing center. Please enter your call's 3-digit extension. Transferring call.
Hello?
Hi,
Doug?
this is Patrick Gorman with Chief Executive. How you doing?
Oh, hi, Pat. How are you? You have Matt Panichis on the line from Peppercom. How's everything?
Doing pretty well, Matt. Thanks for setting everything up today. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, we also have Carolina Castano, who is the Director of Public Relations at NFP, and I think Doug may have joined. Doug, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on. Thanks.
Oh, hi. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate it. So just want to kick things off with a round of introductions, and then I can hand it off to Patrick. So, Patrick, you have Doug Hammond on the line. He is the Chairman and CEO of NFP. And, Doug, you have Patrick Gorman, Managing Editor and Chief Executive. He's looking forward to speaking with you. So with that, Patrick, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And, Doug, thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. And, I guess we can start things off with, just getting a little bit of background on your time with NFP. I know that you've been with the company since 1999. I was just curious as, how the biggest ways in which you've seen the company evolve over that time. I know you've held a number of roles and sort of had a chance to examine the business from a lot of different sides. What are some of the biggest ways in which you've kind of seen the company and the industry evolve over that time?
I think I've been with the company since it was founded. I started as a private equity M&A attorney working for a large private equity fund that started the company up. Mm-hmm. I've kind of seen the company evolve from a concept to a very rigid business model to what I would refer to really as a real business. Mm-hmm. In the early stages of NFP, the business was hyper transactionally focused, and the model was really about acquiring scale in the insurance intermediary space, and leaving kind of the businesses that were acquired almost completely alone. So it was really just about aggregating the revenue and volumes associated with the transactions, and then, ultimately the view of the founding sponsor, the capital sponsor of the business, was to sell the business off and sell that scale off at a increased value based on the aggregated scale. And there wasn't much thought in those days about the strategic consolidation of the business and how we could best serve our clients. So the transformation and the big transformation of the business came, I would say, post-financial crisis period when we had a new CEO come in, which was me, and I had a different view of the business, and I thought that we had acquired many fantastic assets with great people running them in real kind of strategic niche businesses. But we weren't sort of complementing one another, and we weren't coordinating that scale and those competences that we had. So the view was to take, 250 or so independent operating subsidiaries, each operating under a different brand, and create a vision that everyone would buy into, and then pull the company together to approach our markets, our clients, and deal with our employees in a more effective way.
I see.
So for me, that was the biggest transformation. I mean, it was pretty much a wholesale shift in the entire business model of the company, compared to when it was founded.
I see. And in chatting with Matt before our call here, you'd also mentioned that the providing a little bit less of a focus on short-term performance, say on a quarterly basis, versus focusing more on sort of a long-term vision for success is kind of critically important there at NFP. And I was just wondering, why you think that is such a critical recipe for success, and the ways in which you've kind of instilled that value upon your organization and sort of made it a reality.
Well, my experience, if you kind of look back at the history of the company, just to kind of give you a sense of it, it might put some context into what we accomplished at the business. We took the company. We started the company in 1999 from scratch. We acquired a number of businesses. We took the company public in 2003 at $23 a share. We rode the company up sort of during the economic good times from 2003 to 2007 to almost $60 a share from 23. And then between 2007 and 2008, the company went from $58 a share to 81 cents at its low. And that's around the period of time when I took over as chief operating officer and took on responsibility for running the businesses. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of experience kind of running the businesses in a public environment. And when I took over, we were sort of at the lowest point. We ultimately took the company private at 25 in 2003, and then recently we recapped at $85 several months ago at $85 a share. So we've taken the company in 2008 from 81 cents to $85 a share in this year. And I would say that we were able to recover nicely during that period, and I kind of, again, took over the businesses, but everything that we did was very contingent on a quarter-to-quarter view of the business. We had a lot of pressure from shareholders that had been hurt. We had a lot of different types of shareholders that were in the company post-financial crisis. We had kind of leftover growth investors, and we had a big block of value investors. We thought that we needed to reinvest in our business in order to improve our value proposition, but we were constrained based on sort of the different interests of all the different bases of shareholders that we had. So we ended up pushing a lot of capital out in terms of share buybacks and dividends, and focusing less on sort of the long-term investments that we could make in order to create a greater value proposition. When we took the company private in 2013, I took the company private 2 months after I became public company CEO. So I became public company CEO in May, and then took the company private in July. And the view of what we wanted to do was very long-term. And we kind of, rallied the troops around a longer-term vision where we wouldn't be as constrained to invest in our business over the long term and really be focused on a longer-term value proposition. And that's what we did. And I can tell you, I often describe the company sort of as a public company as a muscle car kind of. I'm a car guy, but a muscle car latched to was changed to a giant boulder. Yeah. And when we took the company. When we took the company private, it was just sort of like, the engines the wheels were spinning, but we were able to just execute for the long term and just break those chains, and the company just took off. So we were able to make some decisions that in the short term had a bite to the P&L, investing in certain areas like, large-scale technology transformation, a complete brand consolidation over 250 subsidiaries, aligning sort of titling among all these acquisitions that we had done over the years, building out sort of key performance metrics for each of our employees at every level to engage them and to align them around a common vision and goal for the company. We equitize at a cost our key employees pretty deep within the business, and even though some of our decisions, like our massive technology investments and our recruitment of some high-priced but exceptional leadership talent within the business, hurt us in the short term. From a P&L perspective, it's paid massive dividends over the long term, and it's given us the ability not to deviate from the core mission of consolidating the business around a brand, elevating our people, building just an unbelievably great people-first culture within the business. But it's translated into just fantastic performance for the business. So it's really night and day from when we were a public company. Some people say that private equity firms are incredibly short-sighted. My view is that we'll have the founding private equity capital sponsor, Madison Dearborn, came into the investment in 2013. And while we recapped in early 2017, they kept most of their chips in, and they'll be in the investment for 7 or 8 years at the end of the day, and just really have had a tremendously long-term focus and partnership with management on what needed to be done at the outset, and then how we continue to build a value proposition going forward. So, my experience with private equity is a lot different than what you typically read in the press. They've taken an incredibly long-term view. They've been patient and just have been, great strategic partners in how we execute to a business model.
Oh, certainly, and it's really interesting for such a large kind of go private transaction with Madison Dearborn Partners. Tell me a little bit about that process and what you learned from it. Was it a matter of just finding the right partner to work with who understood what you and the company were looking for and the longer term vision? Was that process of finding the right partner in terms of a private equity firm something that took a long time in terms of vetting and trying to figure out who would actually help execute the longer term vision that eventually worked out for you folks?
Yeah, so it was a process because the company, had performed, had rebounded pretty nicely from sort of like, the dog days of the financial crisis, and there were many private equity suitors that were interested in the business. Mm-hmm. During the financial crisis, we actually did have a number of firms, quite a few, kind of look at the company. We ended up not trading the company because we didn't think we could get sufficient value for our public company shareholders in that period of time. I think a lot of companies went through the same experience. For us, and at least for me personally at that time, I was general counsel with a lot of operating responsibility within the kind of struggling public company. Mm-hmm. My experience dealing with the partners at Madison Dearborn compared to many of the others was that they were, even though we were in a tough position, they were professionally just incredibly dignified. They were good listeners. They had a good appreciation for what we wanted to try to accomplish over the long term, even though in the moment we were struggling. And compared to some of the others, I just found them to be very approachable, good listeners, and I thought they'd be good partners. So when I took over as CEO, I had a view towards the firms that I would like to be in business with and that I thought would add value and be good strategic long-term partners for the business. I can tell you my first choice was Madison Dearborn, but it wasn't my choice. It was the board's kind of decision, and ultimately the board was acting in the best interest of the shareholders. So we had a process with, probably 15 or so private equity funds. At the end of the day, we chose Madison Dearborn because they were the best on value. They said that they would pay sort of what they said they could pay at the beginning. After doing diligence, they stayed there. They were the only firm that actually stayed at the point. I thought that there was sort of a good trust relationship developed out of that. I thought that they stood by their word. And I was, very satisfied that we ended up with them as partners. So the choice, just like we operate the business today, where we pay a lot of attention to the concepts of just fundamental trust and caring for one another within our business and making sure that we're caring, deep down into our organization for our employees. The same types of values ended up dictating the decisions that we made around the private equity capital sponsor. And we found somebody that shared common values and were able to execute accordingly. So it was, everybody brings a lot of expertise around the credit markets to the table, and everyone brings a lot of expertise around optimizing returns, in the private equity world. But I think you need to be focused in business generally on much more than that. And I think that integrity and honesty and values and transparency are critical, particularly when you're undertaking a wholesale transformation of a business model to create long-term value for everyone. It's a tough process, and you want to be in it with people that are going to have your back and are going to stick with you over the long term. So that was some of the stuff that went into that decision.
Certainly. And a lot of our readers are CEOs who are looking to build their businesses through acquisitions and are just as NFP sort of did in the earlier stages of. And I was wondering, in your experience in working with the company through all those kind of deals to help build the business, what were some of the kind of keys to negotiating those deals and identifying the right kind of acquisitions? Is it something trying to identify companies that make not only financial sense but also have a kind of a cultural fit into the organization? What are some of the big things that you looked for when you were looking to make acquisitions to build the business early on?
So we, I can tell you for us within the business, we always say, when we talk about people first, a lot of companies talk about client first. I don't think that we can get to a place where our clients are first without making sure that our people are first. Mm-hmm. We're a human capital business, and we need to ensure that people are engaged and view their engagement with the company as an opportunity for them to professionally mature, professionally develop and operate within an environment that is rewarding and positive.
Yeah.
So when we look at acquisitions, I would say, certainly we need to focus on, the appropriate strategic fit. We need to focus on strategic long-term economic performance of those businesses and understand exactly how they're going to complement what we do and set expectations that are long-term expectations so there are no surprises tied to what the deal looks like once the business is acquired. But I would say that all of those components can be present. You can find a great strategic fit, and you can find a great business from a financial performance perspective, and it can solve a real niche for you. But if you have a disconnect with respect to fundamental values and the nature of the people that are operating within that business and assuming a degree of leadership post-acquisition or maintaining a degree of leadership post-acquisition, if those values are inconsistent, then I think you just run the risk, and it's a big risk, of spoiling everything that you've built. So for us, the deal killer is usually an incompatibility relative to values and culture. So it's pretty key for us. I can tell you one of the first things we did when I took over the business operations post-financial crisis, and I had a view towards building a company with an aligned value structure and culture, the first thing we did was set out a plan that we executed to between 2009 and 2011, where we sold off 70 businesses. And many of those businesses were good-performing businesses that we had acquired so rapidly in the early days, and the businesses were designed, intentionally to operate separately. There was less of a concern around kind of the cultural issues that we're focused on now. When we knew we wanted to transform the business into really one NFP and advance a much more consolidated vision and value platform for the business, we knew that many of those businesses wouldn't fit. And we bit the bullet, and we sold off a big chunk of our assets. We pulled in some cash. We ended up deleveraging pretty rapidly, and deleveraging was a part of it. But the more important part of it at the end of the day was making sure that we had an aligned value structure within the business, and many of those firms just didn't fit.
Yeah, and that shows, that's really, really interesting because, given the opportunity to kind of reimagine the entire structure of the company that opportunity provided to you, to sit down and really focus on what companies are going to be a fit, what companies aren't, and making that hard decision, there must have been a lot of discussion behind it, but in the long run, it seems like it's working out for you and the team.
Well, I always say you can kind of look at the value structure. You can look at the value of the shares. I never, when I talk to employees, I almost never talk about the numbers straight away. Mm-hmm. I go into more like, what are we accomplishing? What are our challenges? What are we doing in our community outreach? Who are our unsung heroes? and then I finish up by giving a pretty detailed financial picture of the company. And this is company wide, so everyone really has an understanding of how they fit in and what's doing well and what might be struggling and what are our opportunities and challenges, so people get a sense of kind of how they fit into the bigger picture. So I typically don't start with it, but I do think if you look at the share price and the timing in which we really tied to the timing in which we really advanced our employee engagement initiatives and our people first culture, you just see tremendous value creation. So for Madison Dearborn, if you think about it, we created, we returned 3.5 times their money in 3 years. So that's pretty good. Awesome. And it's really just a testament of people being, extremely aligned around it. If you can imagine, when we did make these decisions and we had to think about what we were building and what the vision of the business was, we had folks that had sold their business and taken equity in NFP when we were a public company in the 40s, 50s, and close to $60 a share. So they had taken large amounts of the consideration that we paid for their businesses at these extremely high values in public company stock. Mm-hmm. And in just a year's time, that stock was under $1. Wow. So we had to create a connection with our employees and with the sellers of those businesses around a future vision of value and a future vision of the company that would be highly competitive in our markets, where they would trust us to do that after what just happened. That was difficult, but it was part of an exercise of just massive engagement, massive communication, building governance structures within the business to ensure that there was input across all the business lines from the field, and that input was substantively recognized with respect to how we built a detailed plan for the vision of our company moving forward. And when we executed on that in a manner that was consistent as a management team, we were able to win kind of trust and ultimately leadership and deliver value back to all those people. And, a lot of them have recovered and then some and done very well financially. So now we're in a better place in terms of kind of getting people back to a positive number. But it's the foundation of that has all been around kind of a genuine engagement of our people towards a shared vision.
Yeah, certainly. And Doug, my last question for you, we're talking about an engaged workforce and how critical that is. I know it's a critical part of NFP's kind of mission statement. Tell me about some of the keys as a CEO that you keep in mind when looking to make sure that your workforce is engaged on kind of all levels. Are there any kind of big picture things that you kind of try to keep on top of and monitor to make sure that folks throughout your organization remain engaged and are focused on what really matters?
Yeah, what I always talk about is that the larger we get, the more risk we have for disengagement, because I think that it's the CEO can speak, at a certain level and be very consistent with the messaging, but if it isn't happening in the field across our hundreds of offices in the United States and in England and Canada, if we're not speaking consistently at all levels down the chain, then it falls on deaf ears and you just aren't genuine. So, one of the things that I like to focus on is just, I focus on kind of three key things relative to employees, and it's really sort of this notion that was developed in a very simple book by Patrick Lencioni called 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. Very easy read, but it's easy to understand, and I always say it. The 3 signs of a miserable job are when our employees feel anonymous, irrelevant, and they lack any sense of measurement. So there's a sense of immeasurement. So by anonymity, we always talk about it, and I always have my leadership teams through the chain talk about it with their employees is, we don't want our employees to feel anonymous. We want to engage them in a way that is personal, where we really take time out to think about what is going on in their lives. We ask questions about, how their kids are doing and how they're doing and how we can help them kind of advance whatever their career goals may be, and just be sort of straight out kind of genuine with them. So it's just this notion of, people shouldn't be feeling that they're overlooked or invisible within the workplace. The notion of irrelevance, I think with respect to some roles, relevancy is very simple within an organization. A salesperson has a specific focus on goals with respect to the products that they're selling, and they know specifically what their relevance is to the organization and what they're contributing. But for most people that aren't in roles that are so specifically tailored, whether it's admin or if it's a finance role, in many respects they are a part of a bigger machine. People deserve to know what their role is with the organization and how it contributes, and they deserve to be recognized. It's one of the things I'm most proud of, is this notion of kind of unsung heroes and celebrating within our organization people that are not recognized for the values that they create every day. And I think it's also important for people where that relevance factor is so easy, like in a production role or in a very high optics leadership role, they need to understand that there's so many other and more people within the organization where their relevance is not as clear. And it's our job to make sure that they understand their relevance and importance to the organization every day. And this notion of immeasurement, there's a million studies out there that says, you can pay people a ton of money, but if they don't really understand where it's coming from or why or what their specific goals are in any given period, they kind of feel ambivalent to an overall process. People want to be engaged. They want to understand generally how they're being measured relative to performance. So, we sell human resource consulting services, and we need to do it very well internally. These areas of providing, measurement, relevance, and building sort of tools within the company that mitigate this concept of anonymity are fundamental to how we kind of engage our employees, and it's something that we need to do better and better every day and deeper within the organization. So those are kind of some key areas I tend to focus on. I encourage people to read. I always kind of promote this book. I promote a book that I think is a great book by Stanley McChrystal called Team of Teams, which is really about the importance of adaptable management in broad geographically and business diversified operations where you need to delegate a lot of responsibility to management teams and leadership teams at the local level to respond to what's happening local within sort of the general umbrella of a consistent vision. I think that empowers people. It makes people feel accountable for what they're doing and understand what their own purpose is within the organization. And I also love this book, a recent book that I've been giving my management team called The Road to Character by David Brooks. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's an awesome book. And it really just talks about how as people age in their careers, they need to make a transition from kind of building their resume to building kind of, what people will remember them by. And when you have the benefits of a career and you've been rewarded with a leadership position, you need to really think about, first and foremost, the development of others and creating value and growth for others that you lead, and think a bit less about yourself. And that becomes an incredibly rewarding cycle that creates a more giving environment within sort of a business structure. It sounds counterintuitive, but we've been doing it here for many years, and every year it seems to get better, and every year we seem to engage our employees in a more honest way. They appreciate it, and they go the extra mile if they feel good about where they work, and we do our best to appreciate it, and all of that just drives growth and more value for everyone. So I also kind of, and sometimes my private equity capital sponsors worth this, but I also look at margin performance among our peers, and I don't think that we need to sort of be on the bottom of the heap from a margin performance standpoint. But if you do look in our industry, at least, at businesses that are pushing out sort of like the highest revenue margin numbers, it really takes a toll when you push it too hard on the employees, and it diminishes organic growth. So we try to find a balance between, competitive margin performance but also kind of giving back in terms of investments and compensation opportunity, education allowances, these types of things, what we do in terms of community outreach to create an environment that we think is a more fulfilling environment, keeps people engaged, keeps people working harder for their clients, more committed, and drives the organic growth numbers above the peers. So, I don't know if it's a different approach. It's kind of our approach, and it's worked, and it's an approach that I personally feel comfortable with in terms of leading a business that sort of advances a positive and ethical value structure.
Certainly, and it makes a lot of sense. And Doug, I want to thank you for taking all this time. I really appreciate your insights. I know our readers are going to love hearing from you. And if I need anything clarified, I'll be sure to reach out to you and your team. And again, thanks for your time, Matt. Thanks so much for setting this up. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great.
Thanks, Patrick.
Hey, no problem. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.